Welcome to LIGHTBOB TV. Believe it or not, we're at episode 6 Monday, um, and today is gonna be a different kind of source day because while I was doing the research and while I was pulling out my notes, I realized that source by itself doesn't mean nothing. An LED in our case in lighting is absolutely useless. So it comes with a system, and while I was trying to put A, then I would have to put B, then I would have to put C, and at the end I said, well, you know what? Just let's just go and do it, and that way, we'll understand what having a LED source needs to be part of their ecosystem so that we can deliver and then we can guarantee a certain coherence in our design. So the name of this episode is like sourcing defined lighting integrity, and sourcing because most lighting fixtures uh, fail. They don't, and it's not because of design. It's come from mostly bad sourcing decision. For many years, before fixtures and solid state exist, um, the source itself was responsible for the emission of light. Now it's a chain of component that makes this fixture, this source, work, and also all these components make sure that the fixture exists. So is it the egg or the chicken? It both. It's a combination of both. So and today what I wanted to talk about is not the lower end, but like what makes quality lighting. How do we define quality lighting, and why is it so important that we understand the whole chain of command, well, the whole chain of execution, and what is behind it? Because sometimes we don't really understand what's the difference between 29.99 fixtures and $1,000 fixtures. They both emit light. Well, let's start with the structure. The structural problem. So designer, they specify fixtures. We decide, well, we want a fixture that's going to be directional. The manufacturer assembled products, and then the procurement, they sell. So no one um, no one in this integrity chain is really um, no one in this integrity lane chain owns owns anything, because one say, well, we do this, the other one we do that, and the other one do that. So if we have inconsistent performance or premature failure or you know um, valued engineer degradation or brand inconsistency, what's happening? Well, it's the fixture's fault, right? Well, not really. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about it, because when I started to, again, we used to have uh, light bulbs that were 99 cents, right, from the dollar store. And you would put them in, and the quality of the filament or the quality they were built, as soon as there was a little bit of vibration, poof, they would break. And then you would buy quality brand fixture bulbs that are Philips, Osram, or GE, just to name a few, uh, and those would last, you know, a while. And that's why when the technology started to shift, and we took all those incandescent bulbs out, those light source, then it became a system, and that system was part of the reflection that got me, thinking, like, what are we dealing with now, and how does it work? So most LED are selected on based on price, not on bidding. Bidding is a process where LED are tested, and of course, the the more the more testing is done, the more the LED's value goes up. But people would say, well, we don't really need that. We just need, we'll take the lower end. Then part of this system to get this LED working, we have what we call the driver. Now, the driver is the same thing. We may have the idea that we specify a good driver, but along, the production, as things are moving along and money is getting rare, well, we may swap the driver, get a less optimum driver. Now, the lens is the same thing. The lens are going to be changed, and nobody's going to validate the optical, quality. Because, oh yeah, it looks the same. Let's put it in. All right. And then we have, different other component. We have adhesive that will fall, that will fail over time. We have hardware corrosion in the wrong environment. And most of all is that with that fixture that we paid 10, 15, $20 that we put on the ceiling, well, guess what? There's no traceability system. We don't know who did what. The only thing we know sometimes that we bought it at Home Depot or we bought it at this distributor. So most of the problems are invisible at when it's time to install. First of all, sometimes there's no electricity. Sometimes, they're installed way ahead that the power is turned on. And so that we're gonna see, or the problem's gonna appear months or years later. We will have, the problem coming way further down the line than, when we use it. Again, this is why when I started to think about today's episode, it became, it became very complicated very fast, because I cannot just say, well, let's start to break it down and let's just focus today on the chip. Yes, I can focus on the chip, and I can have a whole episode on the chip, but the point is that it's not only the chip that's part of the source when we talk about LED. The quality of the chip, the building consistency, the color stability over time. Yes, all this is very important for an LED. But then we have the driver, the lifespan, the flicker, the thermal behavior. Then we have the reflector. We have the beam control. We have the efficiency. We have glare management. Then we have the lens. Oh yeah, we don't forget about that. Then we have a diffusion quality. Then we have UV stability. Then we have the optical precision of that lens. Then we have, once we put the fixture together, we have the adhesive, the heat resistance. How do they age? Do they go yellow? Do they go dry? Do they go in parts? And then how reliable is the structure? That we're gonna put 30 feet, 40 feet in the air. And that's not all. When we just think that, okay, now we got a good component, well, guess what? No nuts and bolts. Like we have corrosion resistance, we have the mechanical stability, we have the long-term durability. How often it happens? You try to screw a screw, and the quality of the screw is very cheap, and you strip the, let's say it's an Allen key, you strip the Allen key in. What do? Now you gotta go around, try to find an easy out, and it becomes complicated. So when we think about the source, now we're not only thinking about a source, we're talking about a system. So lighting, it becomes a system. So now if we want to have general diffuse, if we want to have directional, it's a system. It's not just a light bulb that we go. It's and that system is not a collection of parts. It's all necessary to deliver our little lighting effect that we want. Yeah, that was me, you know, thinking about this episode. How are we gonna make this work? And I don't know if any of you understand a little bit or have any knowledge about electronic, but in electronic, we have different category of component. We have 10%, 5%, 1%, 0.1%. And the component in, let's say, a military device, a resistance will be, 10 cents. And in a LED will be 1/10 of a cent. Why is there difference? Well, it's the way that the component is assembled, test, and the quality of is of the assembly. Now, let's say we're taking about a capacitor, a little black thing that's inside an LED fixtures or a driver. Now, let's say, all the components are medium grade, and one capacitor is aging faster than expected. So now what's going to happen? Well, what's going to happen is the driver is going to start failing. The LED is still good, the wire, everything we said, but this little capacitor went out of whack, and now the whole chain of command, everything in that fixture is boom, is out. Why? Because one little component went out of whack. And you see that sometimes. You see a fixture that goes, it strobes, you go and walk into a restaurant, one fixture just go out of whack. And these fixtures are probably been manufactured at the same time, bought at the same time, installed at the same time. But one of the critical component inside made this go, out of. So one cheap electronic component, part of our system now, shortened the life of our fixtures. So you, as a designer, you're not specifying a fixture's lifespan. We're not saying, well, this fixtures is as long as the component are gonna last. No, you're specifying a fixtures for the component lifespans, which is different, because in your head you read that the fixture will be good for 50,000 hours. It's even if one of the component doesn't last 50,000 hours in your head, that's what you do, and that's what you paid for, and that's what your client wants, and et cetera, et cetera. So the impact on that component is very, very important. Now, as I was telling you, let's look at the different things that may affect the lifespan of our fixtures. And let's start with the storage, right? So electronic, we all know that electronic and moisture doesn't like to be together. Also, compared to a bunch of light bulb that were, you could store in containers and probably anything, these fixtures are going to be needed to be in a controlled environment because they cannot withstand super heavy heat or super cold. They don't like that. And then, of course, as I said, we talked about the humidity. Humidity is, uh, destroys everything because it brings it oxide parts and it destroys electronic circuit. And then the other thing that is also important is the packaging. Now, what kind of packaging does it come in? So all of that, when we start thinking about long-term storage, uh, then we have what? We have product degradation. We have LED and electronic that is aging. Even if it's not used, they're aging, right? And then we have the inventory that is needs to be rotating. Like the first batch is put in the back of the warehouse. Then the second batch, the third batch, and it's very rare that we rotate unless you have the perfect setup and the first batch get out and the second batch. Well, that could happen too, but it also the question is how long can your product sit before the performance start to be affected. This is exactly what I was telling you about, when I started to think about LED, right? I I I mean, I had bulbs when I used to do lighting design about 30 years ago. We would have a closet with spare bulbs for everything, and that was never a concern, right? Nobody were ever concerned about the 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 the, the viability of the product. Apparently, electronic is not the same, and I just want to let you know that. I mean, it is. Now let's think about, okay, now we got the product done. Now how do we code and how do we trace these systems? That's another area where more and more we have QR code. We have, we can batch some tracking. We have some component, the origin of the component. We have production date. We have supplier identification. But that's all nice. But when you have a product that started aging, how do you catch up? How do you how do you control and make sure that the replacement LED that you're going to put in is going to be the same as the others? You can't. Very, very, very hard. Some manufacturers have electronic that can change it, but again, we're talking about fixtures that are high end. We're not talking about everyday fixtures, and that's what makes the difference between a $300 fixtures and $1,000 fixtures. So it is very important that we are aware, even if we don't understand everything. At least you are aware. You can make a decision, and that brings me to the warranty. Now, how do you control the warranty on these kind of things? If there's a failure part, the manufacturer will send you another fixture, right? But then again, you have the consistency that you will have some problem with, and and you can, if you cannot control it, how can you guarantee a good follow up? How can you guarantee that it would have the same result? Just think, you send somebody to one of those big chain stores. You said you buy 200 fixtures, and after 6 months, 10 of them are out. Go buy 10 more. They're definitely not the same batch. They're definitely not the same SKU. There's a lot of uncertainty, and that's easy to understand. Now, let's say you buy $1,000 fixtures, and a year down the road, one of the component breaks up. How do you deal with that? And that's why it's important that when you talk to manufacturers and when you are doing your specification, those are the questions you need to ask. How can I trace my product? How do you keep the quality consistent? What happened when there's a failure? Who's in charge of what? So and between you and me, most company depends on external LED suppliers. They rely also on external driver manufacturer and probably different optic specialists and assembly partners. So in overall, what's happening is you are as strong as your weakest partner. If you have a partner that is unreliable for their paint, well, guess what? This is your weakest point, and this is something you got to address. And sometimes you don't know right away. You'll need to do, you'll have to have a couple. So one of the way to address that is maybe we can start doing some third-party checklists before a long production run. Before we commit to scale, look at their performance consistency. Look at their photometry testing, their thermal testing, right? What's the life cycle data of their product? And what kind of warranty do they provide, and what's their failure history? Any company that tells you, well, we don't have any failure, you better start running, because every company has failure. But how do they handle it? How do they work with it? How does that, make sure that you, as a specifier, is protecting you and your client? So basically, part of that's the first part. Then let's talk about their operational. What's their lead time? What's the production capacity? What kind of quality control process they have, right? And of course, then we talk about the financial. What kind of stability do they have with supplier? And what's the risk of disruption? Fortunately for us in the state right now, we have all kinds of disruption happening. So this is a good way to test our manufacturer. It's a good way to test longevity. It's a good way to also test a lot of things that never happened to us, because now we're putting our name onto those products, and you are, in the hot seat, and so it's time to see what really they have under the hood. One of the things that I always judge is the communication. What's the responsiveness? Like when you call, you say, "Hey, I have a problem." What's trigger? What's the chain of command? How does it work? And again, I was telling you that if nobody ever had any problem, run. Exactly. What's their technical transparency? How do they deal with problem? They're pointing fingers or they're taking responsibility. And for me, I don't care. I don't care who's responsible. I just want to talk to somebody that's going to help me to find a solution. And most of the time, when it's local, I will go to the place and I will look. So show me what happened. What's this? What's that? So in my career, I helped solve a lot of problems because of that, because I was a very hand-on person, and I could come in and also help troubleshoot, because I have a vast experience in troubleshooting, and I can help, problem with each management, with the environment. Is it, the way we're assisting? Is it the usage? Is it the installation? Look at this. They modified the bracket. Why did they modify the bracket? You look on one, you look on two, you look on three. Well, they ordered the wrong bracket, so that did affect. And because of that, the plenum where they install it, instead of being 24-inch, is 6-inch. So our heat test and the fixture. So you see what I'm saying? The the more data you have, the better solution you can come up, and you can, the more time you're saving. Because if everybody's like, well, we don't know, it happened just like that, nothing just happened. It could be a component in the electronic world, but we know that sometimes if it's one in 1,000, it's easy. If it's more and if it's recurring, there's a problem there. And I don't know how many times I told my clients, a product that is tested in the lab is not the same as a product that's installed in reality. And this is where, you know, it's important to understand the difference. It's important to understand that things happens in different contexts, and some of them are provoked and some of them are natural. So and when you know the difference, then you can start to understand that what you can fix and how you can improve these situations. So before it was very easy to manufacture. We were selecting component independently. So this guy's gonna sell me the sockets. I'm gonna buy the screw from this, and this one this, and let's get the cheapest of everything, and build a lighting fixture. So the cost was a big driver, and the life cycle, nobody really ever thought about it because it was very well built, and a tin can is a tin can, and unless you put it in an extreme condition in on the ocean side and it got corroded by salty water, most of the time it could stay there forever. Today, when we have a lighting fixtures, we don't have that luxury because it's a system-based sourcing. So if our driver is not compatible with the LED, and if we don't have the right sealant for the lens so that the whole circuit doesn't have any moisture, well, guess what? The life cycle will go down, and the integrity of the component will take a hit, and that's a big thing. So when we start thinking about long-term performance, when you have a system, there's a lot of different things we have to look at and that we have to be aware of. And even if we don't control them, it is part of our problems. It is, as a designer, it is part of your problem. You are responsible for that. So you specifying low-end product on a high-end project will not help you. You will save some money, but the integrity of your design, the integrity of your project, and the long term of those products may not make it because of that choice you made to try to save some money. And when that happened, guess who's responsible? The client that told you to cut $10,000 on your budget doesn't even remember. But you did that exercise and you didn't hold your ground. And what happened is that you went with product ABC instead of DEF, and that's what happened. Now you're the one that is to blame because you 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 specified a product that was subpar, and that's why when I was thinking about this episode, I was thinking this is this is not fun, like this is not a place you want to be. So make sure when you're sourcing, right? And these are basic things that we know, but right now more than ever with the LED, when you're sourcing a product, make sure that the brand has a reputation, good reputation, and also make sure that it's easy to maintain. That if you need to change something, of course, like you wanna keep your clients satisfied, and you want to avoid long-term liability. But you know the lighting fixture don't stop at the specification, and this is where your leadership you know needs to be at his peak, because as you go you will be challenged. As you go, client will challenge you, distributor, electrician, and where do you position yourself is very, very strategic, because it will also guarantee your future. If you're a pushover and if you don't keep your ground, what's going to happen is that you're not going to survive. And unfortunately, it's going to be very tough for you, because you're going to be one of those guys that all the problems happen to. The spiral. Normally, that's where it starts. Is you don't hold your ground, and then you go with a lower product, and it goes like this, right? Because you you didn't keep your integrity, and you went with the lowest product, or you became inconsistent, or sometimes it's somebody in your team. I'm saying you because normally, if you have your own firm, you know that it starts from you. But even if you have employees, it's even worse, because sometimes they don't want to bring you the bad news. They don't want to tell the clients that it's going to cost them an extra. They don't want to tell them that the fixture that they specify is 3 months backlog, because there's a conflict in a certain country. So it is sometimes they're not easy conversation to have, but somebody has to have it, and also the reason why is because you want to keep your design integrity. If you don't keep your design integrity, you don't have nothing. And then, of course, if you start going down, then forget about it, right? And guess what's going to happen when we have a lighting audit? Well, somebody is going to come in and they're going to look at the product. They're going to look at the spec, product, spec. It's not the same thing. And whose fault is it? And then the electrician is going to say, well, it's not my fault. I asked the designer. The designer said yes. Do you have this in writing? Yes. Here's the email. And then you look at it, and it's one of the junior, or you did it yourself. Yeah, not fun. And I think that's going to be it for the source, because at the end, all we want to do is create a beautiful design. All we want to do is make the best for our client. But sometimes we need to do and take that hard road, and we have to tell our clients, and maybe it requires for you to redesign a certain area. Maybe it requires for you to work with a different manufacturers. Maybe it requires, but this extra work that you're going to do will help you to, at the end, keep your integrity, keep the integrity of your project, and most of all, make sure that the concept that you promise, you can deliver it. So tomorrow, um, we're going to talk about and fixtures intelligence. So thank you very much. It was fun, and hope you learn a few things, and that you know you're gonna apply what you learn. So thank you.